If we can't be a board observer or we can't be on the board, we're not interested in being involved in that deal. How can we collectively build a small language model that we can all learn from all the deals that we've been involved in over the years? Think of how powerful that could be. You know, you can ask a CFO, what's our cash position? But it's a whole heck of a lot different than when you say, show me your bank statement.
My guest today is Scott Jacobs, Executive Director of QCA Ventures, a Cincinnati, Ohio-based investor group that has been engineering their angel investing process since 2000. In this episode, Scott breaks down his group's rigorous due diligence framework, their unique hybrid fund plus network model, and how they're actively using AI to match deals with member expertise. I hope you enjoy learning from Scott as much as I do.
Scott, thank you for being with me today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are sitting here on day 2 of the Angel Capital Association Annual Summit in Westminster, Colorado, and it has been a blast so far. Scott, thank you for taking a few minutes to chat with me. I'm very excited to hear from you about the QCA journey. And this in particular is a really exciting season for QCA because you guys just rebranded.
Yes, sir.
And I'd love to hear how that happened. Like why rebrand? And maybe as part of a starting point, you could give me a quick background on QCA and what's changed over time that now has led to this rebrand.
Sure. We started in the year 2000. We are the result of a unicorn that happened in Cincinnati. A spin out from the University of Cincinnati was on the forefront of computer-aided design for engineers. A company called Structural Dynamics Research Corporation, SDRC. They exited for just under $1 billion in 2000. And
Time to exit.
one of our founders, Tony Shipley, had worked there previously in his career, and he got together with 4 ex-SDRC executives and founded Queen City Angels. And their original mission at the time was just giving back to founders. Tony had had a successful exit with his own enterprise software, Internet of Things a startup, and had a very successful exit, and wanted to just give back his experience. And he had received capital from 5 venture capital firms. He had done mezzanine financing, and he had been through the entire process of M&A to sell his company. So his experience was really deep and wide, where the other 4 executives didn't have that sort of broad sort of funding expertise. So the group started out with 5 members, grew to 19 members in the second year. And keep in mind, and this is really important as far as sort of the brand and the core of QCA, it was founded by 5 engineers. And what's interesting and cool about that is if you know engineers, very process oriented, constantly experimenting, what can be done differently? What are your lessons learned? Continuous improvement process, driving out the fatal flaws. And that has permeated the organization from day one.
That is a recipe for extreme success or extreme pain, depending on your perspective.
It could be, but in this particular case, I think the organization made a number of, they learned a lot in the first few years. They put too much money into deals. And then around 2003, the state of Ohio actually put together a program, a very unique program, where they received anti-tobacco settlement money, civil lawsuit, where all the states received money. And what Ohio did was very unique. They put the money into a public-private organization called the Ohio Third Frontier. So it was $2.1 billion that the state of Ohio wanted to put to work in reviving the technology economy in the state of Ohio. So that was our first forte into having funds. So we started out as a network group, and then we started little micro funds in 2003.
So just to pause, what's interesting to me about this story is, and I think what is so special about QCA is 2000, this is like the angel network concept barely existed by this point in time. Like the best I've been told, the very first angel network was Band of Angels in 1995. So this is just
Actually,
a
Rocky's
few
Ventures
short.
Club was
it RVC?
earlier.
When was RVC?
Yeah. Yeah, they were slightly earlier.
Okay, well, 94, 95,
Yeah.
mid-90s, let's say, is when angel network as a concept got started.
That's right.
This is very shortly after this. And so that bias towards experimentation from the beginning is, I think, crucial to your point to this story, and I imagine has deeply shaped how QCA has evolved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and what we did is very typical of what I'm talking about. We didn't know what the playbook was. And so we went out and we did a smart practices study of existing angel groups in different parts of the country. So we talked to the Harbor Angels in Boston. We talked to angel groups on the West Coast. And I wasn't part of the group at the time, but I'm sure they talked to Band of Angels, and TCA Ventures started shortly after Band of Angels did. We talked to some groups in the Research Triangle. And so what we found then that we find today is it's a very collegial group of early stage investors. We're all learning from one another, and we're all borrowing smart practices from one another. And if you look at even fast forwarding in our group, we use the exit strategy canvas, which was developed by Rocky's Venture Club. We used an original scoring rubric that Venture South created. We had Ron Weissman come in and do a session with our members on board governance.
As you may have noticed, we are recording this conversation live from the Angel Capital Association Annual Summit. And if you're not familiar with the ACA, this is the world's largest professional organization specifically designed for angel investors. And so if you're serious about this ecosystem or just interested in learning more, their education, resources, and community are definitely worth checking out. You can go to angelcapitalassociation.org. And I got to say, this is our second year recording live in the room, and I had an absolute blast and cannot wait to come back for future years. I hope to see you there.
We like to think that we're willing and able to tap into the smartest practices of these groups they're all smart groups. We all don't operate the same fashion, but we all have the same goals, and we can all learn from one. And so that has been a big part of the core of our existence is around education. Our North Star is entrepreneurs, but from the very beginning, what we found was entrepreneurs weren't able to make legitimate pitches to angel investors.
Say more. Why is that?
They didn't know the playbook. They did not know what angel investors were looking for. And we felt compelled to help entrepreneurs get better at that. And so in 2001, we started an entrepreneur boot camp. This will be our 26th year running that program. A 2-day sort of pre-accelerator program, 13 sessions over 2 days. And we cover everything that an early founder needs to know in order to go before angel investors.
And you've been running this for 25 years. I mean, this is kind of sexy now.
31 founders have gone through that program.
That is incredible. I mean, this is a sexy concept now. Entrepreneurship's kind of hit the mainstream in a lot of ways. You guys are doing this way before it was cool.
Yeah, and back in the early days, we were espousing writing a business plan. Okay, so we still
don't do that if you're listening to this.
Well, we still think that a founder and anybody that's starting a business should write a business plan. But nowadays, plug it into AI and out it comes, right? But the point is, you have to be thinking about every aspect of your business when you're starting it. And you want to start it the right way. And so like the first session of the boot camp is, do you even have a product or service? Have you done the early customer discovery and research on the problem to be solved? Focus on the problem, not the solution. In that session, our speaker, longtime QCA fan, she goes over the CB Insights top reasons that startups fail. And the number one reason, time in and time out, is product market fit. So these are the areas that we focus on with founders. And when we look at a funding application comes in, is there a product market fit? Do we have the right team working on the problem? We're betting on the jockey, not the horse. But we felt that we needed to create really a two-sided marketplace. We needed to train founders on how to pitch funders, and we needed to pitch and work with funders on how to understand investing in early stages. And so that has been a part of our organization from the very beginning, and it's still a part of our organization. Now, how do we use the best practices in AI use? And the culmination of that, when I came on board, I celebrated my 12th year just last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. When I started, QCA, Queen City Angels, had a line drawing of the landscape of the waterfront of Cincinnati on the Ohio River. And one of the things I pointed out, I went to the ACA Summit in 2014. I wasn't even officially an employee yet. And I pointed it out to Tony Shipley. I said, hey, you may notice that the line drawing is about 10 years old and there are new buildings along the waterfront. And I said, it may be time for us to take a look at that. Well, what that led to was we did a strategic planning process in 2015 where we interviewed, we did a 360 research project and interviewed everybody in the ecosystem. We interviewed founders we had funded, founders we hadn't funded. We interviewed ecosystem players. We interviewed members. We interviewed colleges and universities. We interviewed sponsors. And we gathered up all this information, and the outcome from that was we created 3 standing committees that we felt had to address some of the issues that came up for Queen City Angels. One of the primary issues that came up related to branding and marketing and awareness. We had been around long enough at that point that people had heard our name, but they really didn't know our mission. And so we embarked on a rebranding at that point where we really had to freshen up the brand. And what we did is we went out and did an assessment with our members over and above what the yearly membership dues are to embark on hiring a professional design firm to do all of the research on what color schemes we should be using, what icons we should use as part of the logo, and what the tagline should be. So we noticed that the design firm did a study and really nobody owned the color purple. And so we felt like that was something that we could own, and that became part of the colors theme for the logo. If you look at the logo today, the evolution of it, these little lines under here represent the river that flows along the Cincinnati and on the Ohio River, but that also represented angel wings. The little icon above it represents the buildings along the river, but it also represents the founder that's in the middle and the mentors and angel investors that are around the founder. So there was great iconography that was created as part of the logo. Now, when you fast forward,
so this was all in 2015, and the rebrand
2016 is when all this happened.
And this was a rebrand from Queen City Angels to...
Well, that was still Queen City Angels at that point.
Okay.
And the other thing that we did was we created a standing committee that was the marketing committee. We had another committee that was focused on DEI. That now has been rolled into the marketing committee. So the marketing committee is now marketing and member engagement. And then the third committee, it's very important, was our standards and practices committee. So you go back to what I mentioned earlier, where I said process improvement, continuous improvement. We felt like we had to have a standards and practices committee that analyzed everything that we were doing. Now, if you move forward, we had a couple of chairpersons for that committee. In 2020, we had a new standards chairman that came on board, and he decided to do a smart practices study amongst investor groups around the country.
Repeat the founding study essentially in 2020. So 20 years later,
yes,
let's do it again.
Exactly. And he gathered up 30 of our members, and over a year, we gathered up all the smartest practices. That's when we borrowed the exit strategy canvas. And the culmination of that is what we consider to be our operations manual, our playbook. It's called our standards and practices guide. There really is no other document like that in this space.
Which that document, this is a book. I mean, it's a monster.
353 pages.
You guys, I saw this originally in a LinkedIn post. There's just a photo of the book with some stories around it. And I was like, what is that? No angel group has processes that are that well defined, articulated. I mean, it's just incredible to have that little level of detail and thoughtfulness around each piece of the puzzle.
It is the place that I take every new member to when we onboard new members. And I tell them, we are a learn by doing group. And this is a big part of our formula for member engagement. We onboard them by taking them the standards and practices guide and say, this is your book knowledge. If you want to learn how to make money in this asset class, you read the standards and practices guide. This is what you need to know when you start sitting in on screening meetings. You're going to hear terminology that's used, nomenclature that you may not be familiar with, that you're going to hear in screening meetings, in investor meetings, in due diligence. Go back to the guide, because there are definitions in there. There is links to webinars done by the ACA. There's recommended reading. It is a treasure trove of a document. But if you ever have a question about anything that goes on in the group, go back to the guide, because it's in there. That's rewritten. There's a new version written on it every single year. Last year, our chairman of that committee wrote a primer on 6 of the AI platforms that are being used and what they're primarily being used for. So that is a document that is used by our group to help understand and build in consistency. One of the things that we did, we look at 7 areas when we do due diligence. And this is common amongst angel investor groups, early stage groups. Things like competition, IP, sales and marketing, the management team. But we look at 4 subcategories within those 7 larger categories. So we're looking at 28 areas that we're scoring. And that rolls up into an overall score when we've done the due diligence. What's different about us is we went in, the Standards and Practices Committee went in, and they wrote out the definition. It's a 1 to 5 scale, what a 1 and a 3 and 5 is for every one of those 28 variables. So I've had members say to me, I've never been on a due diligence team, but boy, was it easy to be able to score because I had those definitions in front of me. So what has evolved with QCA to where we are today is last year or earlier this year, we closed out a $25 million Series B round for a pharma company, a biopharma company. And coincidentally, one of the members of the management team for that biopharma company went through the entrepreneur boot camp. He left P&G. He had worked in the early ventures area of P&G. And I met with him later, and he was telling me, hey, when I left P&G, I went to this entrepreneur boot camp. And I was like, Steve, you don't realize, but that was our boot camp. So, and then the team later went through our morning mentoring program, which is another program that we've been running for 20 years. So we've seen founders that have gone through some of our educational programs that now have gotten to a stage where they've raised over $30 million in that particular deal. Well, angel investor groups don't typically lead Series B rounds. We have been leading Series A rounds now. And so we have really moved a little bit downstream. And we just determined that at this point, in the stage in which we're investing, that it was time for a name change. There is a misperception with some groups about angel investors, unfortunately. This conference is an example of people that are focused on being professional angel investors. Unfortunately, there are institutional investor groups, family offices, and others that hear the term angel investor and they immediately think that those are just two foursomes on a golf course. The groups here are not that way. They have a process. They've got deal criteria. They're professionally run. But we wanted to move away from the fear that people would perceive us before really knowing who we are and what we do, that we were two foursomes on a golf course. So we figured there was equity in the QCA part that's part of our name now, because people were shorting Queen City Angels to QCA anyway.
Yep.
And then we added the Ventures name. Now, we went through a whole process to do that. We didn't just do that willy-nilly. We did a whole brainstorming session at our annual meeting last year.
Yeah, rebranding is no joke. I mean, it is
it's not a simple process.
Not easy.
Yeah, this is an iterative process. So we didn't go through the same process that we did when we rebranded and created a new logo. But we talked to TCA Ventures because they went from Text Coast Angels to TCA. We talked to North Coast because now they're North Coast Ventures and they used to be North Coast Angels. And we asked them how they went about doing their process.
Of course. And this whole time you've had these fund mechanisms kind of on the side, as well as I understand. But back in 2003, you mentioned when this
it was a $1.5 million fund.
Yeah.
Our last fund was a $23 million fund.
Wow.
Which is really not typical of angel investor groups either.
Totally. But I think it provides so much value to the members that are investing directly because of a lot of synergies that you get from the capacity to participate in the instant diversification through the fund and more. I'm curious how that interaction has, in your opinion, played out and provided value to the members of the group.
Well, it provides value to everybody involved. So with our process, because we're investing out of a fund, when a founder comes to us and wants to seek investment, we can say, if you go through our due diligence process and it's very rigorous and it's going to be painful, I'm telling you that up front, you'll learn from the process. We'll have founders that'll come to us after the process and say, boy, we learned some things that we really didn't know about our business after we went through your process. I just talked to one of the founding members of one of our portfolio companies, and he said, we uncovered that we weren't paying sales tax.
Oh.
And we fixed that problem for them. But that was uncovered in the due diligence process. So what we have found is that when founders come to us, we can say to them, we're going to write you a check out of our fund that's going to be in the range of $250,000 to $500,000. So that's a guarantee. What we've learned historically is that since we're a hybrid and we do a fund investment as our lead, the members that write sidecar checks, typically we've seen that that's 2x what the fund invests. So if you're putting $250,000 doing the quick math, now you're putting $750,000 into a deal. That's a sizable check.
That is. Some angel groups, that's what they do in a year.
Well, and what that does for us, and we presented on this in the 2024 summit in Columbus. We did a study on exits of 7 investor groups, 100 exits, and we asked them what were the primary drivers for success and failure for those exits. And what was interesting about that was the 3 factors were the same for both. So I'll ask you, what do you think the 3 factors were?
Oh, I couldn't begin to
I'm
guess.
putting you on the spot,
Oh,
right?
man.
Okay. So I'll give you the answer. Timing. Timing could be the timing of the investment. Is the technology too early or too late? Timing of the exit. And if you think about AI, boards could be looking at the trends going on in the M&A activity. What's going on in that sector? The second area was the management team. And the third was board governance. So in our evolution of how we look at deals now, we've found that to be true, is that I will not look at a deal unless we have some sort of line of sight that's board governance activity. If we can't be a board observer or we can't be on the board, we're not interested in being involved in that deal. We feel with the expertise of our now 225 members, we bring more to the table than just writing the check. And we found that to be true. And we just went through a due diligence process with an AI technology that's looking to help the answer engine optimization that's beginning to overtake search engine optimization using AI, where the founder said, look, you guys were incredible. We want you to lead our deal, but we want some of your members to be on our board of advisors. And so that's really cool. And that's part of what we bring to the table. And part of the reason our members sign up from the very beginning. The studies have been done that angel investors, the reason they become angel investors are not just about making money. It's about how can they give back to founders. And this is what we're doing to help give back to founders.
Incredible. So Scott, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, given that you have 26 years of engineering rigor on what are the best practices, tell me a few more things that you all have discovered in your iterations that you feel like people aren't talking about enough, that angels individually and networks holistically tend to miss, that you guys have discovered through your iterative processes.
Yeah, we invested in a deal a couple 3 years ago where we came in as one of the last investors, and there was some information that we didn't look at closely enough, and one of the things that we did not hear about when we were going through the due diligence for this particular company was that one of the board members for that company, prior to our getting involved in due diligence, had made an offer to buy the company from his investor group that he represented. Looking back on that, that was really an early signal that we had a hostile situation going on that board, because his offer was well below what we thought the market rate valuation would be for that company. Fast forward 6 to 9 months later, hostile takeover by that particular investor group. We think some unsavory things were happened by the management team that had gotten hired by that capital provider. And it was a hard lesson for our group. It was a bad failure for us. And we know now that we really want to be the last check that's written. And there were some things that we learned from that deal. Bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, just to put a pin in that first, thank you for sharing that, because it's super easy and fun to talk about the winners and what worked out great. It's really hard to get on a podcast and talk about the misses. Articulate for me, like, what were those takeaways? Because that is an important piece of information. It's somewhat obscure in the process. And so now I imagine you have some new diligence questions. Articulate for me what the takeaways were from that particular experience.
Well, we found that the management team was not being exactly completely transparent about the financials and the financial position of the company. That was probably poor board oversight. And therein lies the importance of strong board governance. Are they asking really pointed questions to the management team and double checking the answers? You know, you can ask a CFO, what's our cash position? But it's a whole heck of a lot different than when you say, show me your bank statement. So that's the level of rigor that needs to be done by boards to make sure that they're double checking that the answers are accurate, truthful, and transparent. Company ran itself out of cash and put itself in a scenario where they had to accept a hostile offer, and that worked out poorly for all the other investors in the group in that deal. And so that was a very difficult learning lesson for us, and but we've seen a lot of great successes over the years. In 2023, we had 2 exits that happened on one day.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I tell our members they should have gone out and bought a lottery ticket that day, because not the typical thing that ever happens to an investor group.
Yeah, that's a good day.
But what we have found, and I think we're seeing this trend nationally now, is that first of all, not all the opportunities are on the West and the East Coasts. On that particular day, we had an exit for a SaaS business that was related to the supply chain vertical, and it was a $29 million exit. And we had a high IRR on that deal, and it was about 8 to 9x exit. So, you know, what we have found is that we're not looking for unicorns. You know, we in a SaaS business, you can have a 29 or a 50 or $80 million exit, and everybody can make a lot of money on that. So you can make a lot of money hitting doubles and not getting up there looking to hit a home run at a grand slam.
A quick note before we continue the conversation. Alongside the Diligent Observer podcast and newsletter, I also run an outsourced operations service specifically built to serve angel networks. My team handles things like initial screening, social media, newsletter prep, platform management, and a whole lot more. The kinds of things that either aren't getting done or shouldn't be done by busy community leaders. If that sounds interesting to you, send me a note. Now, back to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's so interesting to me about the space, is the variety of strategies that can work really effectively in the space, as long as you're systematic and intentional about it, and you know that that's what you're doing.
Well, the standards of practices guide and the rigor that we have added into our due diligence process has proven out in the last 2 funds. In our 5th fund, we invested in 20 companies, and 2 of those companies failed. But we still have 13 companies that are operating out of that fund, and we've returned 92% of the capital. So if you do the math there, we have 13 shots on goal to get well above a 1x on that fund.
Not a bad spot to be.
And the same has happened with even better results in our 6th fund, and now we're investing out of our 7th fund. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about, if you don't mind, is in our 6th fund, what was different about that fund versus the first 5 funds was we had been a co-investor with the state in our first 5 funds. That limited us to only doing fund investments out of companies that were located in the state of Ohio.
All of this through Fund 6 was in Ohio.
Through Fund 5.
Through Fund 5 was in Ohio. Wow.
The only fund investments we could make were with companies located in Ohio.
Okay.
Now, we could invest as a network anywhere.
I see.
So if it's Indiana, Kentucky, and we were mostly regional at that point. But in Fund 6, when we started that fund, the state did not have an RFP to put money into our group or other groups like ours. So our investment thesis changed. And so that allowed us to invest out of the fund anywhere within the United States. So that opens up huge opportunity, but now that's a huge challenge, right? So where am I going to find the deals? That's my job as executive director. I'm overseeing the top of the funnel. And then on the other end of it, I'm syndicating the deals after we have decided to lead a deal and go out and find additional co-investors. So we were one of the founding members of the Angel Capital Association. And we have gotten to know a lot of angel groups through our relationships that we built over 20 years. We had a little roundtable dinner last night with a number of experienced angel investor groups just to talk about topics that we're all faced with these days. We talked about secondaries, and we talked about whether or not angel groups are looking at taking a small sliver of a deal that can be used for running their groups, and other issues that we're all faced with. And we just shared a lot of great ideas. And what came out of that was we want to have a continued group discussion amongst some of the well-renowned, longer-standing groups. And so we're going to continue to use that continuous improvement process. And so now we invest everywhere in the country, and I can cherry pick the best deals with our co-investors and come in at a right stage and do the right timing. But I can source deals from the other groups.
The world
around
is
the
your
country.
oyster at this point.
Exactly.
Wow. So tell me, I'm actually really curious what is happening right now that you're excited about, intrigued about, that you feel like isn't getting talked about enough in the angel world. You were in that meeting last night. I'd love to hear your takeaways from that or from the event overall that you feel like are really interesting insights or things that we should be thinking about.
Come on, how exciting is AI?
Let's talk about AI.
You know, my job before I came on board at QCA was I wrote marketing plans for companies. And I used my own sort of proprietary blend of doing discovery internally, interviewing stakeholders, but I used secondary and primary research and competitive intelligence to help write the marketing plan. What could I have done with AI, the power of AI to do secondary data research? I mean, all that information is at your fingertips. Think about how our angel groups can be using AI to look at what trends are going on in an industry, what's going on with the competitors for any of the companies that we're funding. All these different uses of AI are just absolutely incredible. You talk about force multipliers in a group. You know, how much more can you do with much fewer resources? The deal that we recommended to our investors on Monday, every one of the 12 members of that due diligence team were using extensive research on competitors and what's going on in that particular industry vertical. It's just so incredibly exciting. And it's almost a question that you have to ask in screening when you talk to a company. How are you using AI? And if they're not, that's a huge red flag. So I'm just incredibly excited about the advances that have been made there. And, it's just so cool, to look at how, you can use Grok or Claude or ChatGPT, Perplexity, and all these different platforms. And that's kind of the next stage of what we're looking at doing. So as executive director, what I'm trying to do, and we have an AI task force. So we are using statements, AI statements on how and when we use AI. So we're very transparent with founders about that. We're going to use a statement like that on our website. But we also have a usage statement for our members. We will put that in our member handbook. We encourage you to use AI, but here's how we want you to use it.
I think that is so important, and something that I think angel groups are really struggling to be thoughtful about. In my experience working with many, is developing and formulating that AI policy, along with every other business in the world today,
right.
is everyone's having to articulate this. So I love that you're doing that aggressively for members to help them understand how it fits.
Well, yeah, we never take for granted any of the output. We brought in an expert that trained 2,000 people at P&G on how to prompt and how to use AI. And, we paid for him to come in and do a session with our members.
Wow.
And so we don't take for granted any of the output that we're getting from AI, cite sources, cross-reference other AI platforms to make sure that you're getting a similar output. But the power is just incredible. Now, my job, I think, is we have developed Microsoft tools. We're using AI, and we're using within our platform, we're using an AI. So we've used low code, no code Microsoft open source tools to do our deal flow platform. So we created what we call our deal hub. And at the same time, we created a member hub. So we have a bio page for each one of our members, but we have embedded in that skills, expertise, and experience. So now when we get a funding application in and we want to screen that particular company, I have a prompt library that says, what skills, expertise, and experience are required to look at this particular deal? ChatGPT is injected into our platform. It will look at the answers from the funding application and say, this is an AI deal. You need expertise in AI. You need expertise in enterprise software, blah, blah, blah. It'll give the requirements. It'll go to the external world and look at what needs to be used. It'll query our member database, and it's a recommendation engine for the top 10 members that have the most relevant experience. So it's a really neat way for not having to be residing in my head.
Yeah, right. Because then Scott doesn't have to call around and go, who do I know that is part of the group that knows something about this?
So I'm a Miami University graduate, and we do programs with them. And so one of our members is embedded in there in the entrepreneurship program. And he said, well, how many of our members are alum? And I thought we had 6 or 8. I could go into that member hub and just put Miami University because it's got all the universities that are members. And I found out we had over 20. And so all those people we can help get involved in the programs at Miami University. So the power of it is phenomenal. But back to the AI part. So our members were using AI in the last due diligence process we were going through. What's important for me to try to enable is I want to encourage our members to be doing that AI work inside our platform. Because if they're going offline to do that, even if they turn the learning off, I'm not learning. We have incredibly smart members. All of our groups do. I mean, the power, the aggregate power of the ACA is incredible if you look at skills, experience, expertise. But if I'm not capturing what their prompt is and how they are engaging in the AI, I can't keep that inside our platform and inside our environment so that we can learn from them. So I think the bigger challenge for the angel groups and the way that we can collaborate, and maybe this is a topic that we do with our little roundtable, is how can we collectively build a small language model that where we can all learn from all the deals that we've been involved in over the years. Think of how powerful that could be.
That is an interesting project.
It's a BHAG, I admit, but Moore's Law is going to come into play one day. And we need to be positioned where we can index, organize, create data lake houses where we can put all our data in there and we can all learn from our own data.
Well, Scott, I think that is a great place to pin. Lots to look forward to in the angel space. Thank you for taking some time to chat with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew, and if you're an angel investor looking for essential angel intel in 5 minutes every week, I think you'd enjoy my newsletter. I send my best stuff, interesting deals, and more straight to your inbox so you never miss a thing. Subscribe today at thediligentobserver.com.